The year is 1763. The place is the Great Lakes region of North America, a vast forested world of rivers, lakes, and ancient portage trails. The 7 Years' War between France and England has just ended. France has lost. England has won. And the Native American tribes who had allied with the French, who had traded with them, fought alongside them, called them brothers, have been abandoned. The French have ceded their forts and trading posts to the British. The British soldiers who now occupy those posts are not like the French. They do not give gifts, they do not distribute ammunition and gunpowder, they do not speak the native languages. They treat the native peoples as conquered subjects, not as allies. They build forts on native land without permission. They allow settlers to pour into the Ohio Valley, trampling the hunting grounds, cutting down the forests, building cabins on the graves of ancestors. The native peoples are angry, they are hungry, they are desperate. They need a leader, and they find one in a man named Pontiac. He is the war chief of the Ottawa people. He is not a king. He does not command by birthright. He commands by force of will, by courage, by vision, by the power of his words. He has traveled among the tribes of the Great Lakes, from the Mississippi to the Mohawk Valley. He has carried a message. The Master of Life has spoken to him in a vision. The Master of Life is angry. He has commanded the native peoples to drive out the British, to return to the old ways, to reject the alcohol, the blankets, the guns of the white man, to fight, to kill, to reclaim the land. Pontiac's message spreads like wildfire. The tribes, Ottawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Huron, Delaware, Shawnee, Seneca, begin to unite. For the first time, a pan-Indian alliance is forming, and Pontiac is its leader. In May 1763, Pontiac launches the most formidable Native American uprising of the 18th century. He attacks Fort Detroit, the most powerful British post in the West. His warriors overrun the fort's outer defenses. They capture supply wagons, they kill soldiers, they lay siege. For months, the British are trapped inside. Pontiac's warriors ambush relief columns, burn supply depots, and raid settlements across the frontier. 9 British forts fall. Hundreds of settlers are killed. Thousands flee back to the eastern seaboard. The British Empire, which had just defeated France, is suddenly fighting for its survival in the American wilderness. Pontiac has done what no native leader had done before. He has united tribes who were traditional enemies, and he has brought the mightiest empire on earth to its knees. This is the story of Pontiac, the Ottawa chief who led a rebellion, the uprising that shook the colonies, and the leader who almost changed the course of American history. To understand Pontiac, you must first understand the world that shaped him. Pontiac was born around 1720, probably near the Maumee River in what is now Ohio. His father was an Ottawa warrior. His mother was Chippewa. He grew up in a world of shifting alliances, French, British, and native tribes all competing for control of the fur trade. He learned to fight, to hunt, and to speak several languages. He was not a chief by birth. He earned his status through war. He fought alongside the French against the British during the 7 Years' War. He was present at the Battle of the Monongahela in 1755, where a French and native force destroyed the British army of General Edward Braddock. He saw the power of native warriors when they were united. He also saw the weakness of the French, their eventual defeat, their abandonment of their native allies. He swore that his people would never be abandoned again. After the war, Pontiac watched as the British took over the French forts. He watched as the British commander, Major Robert Rogers, tried to assert authority over the native peoples. He watched as the British cut off the flow of gunpowder and ammunition, a deliberate policy to reduce the native peoples' power. He watched as settlers poured into the Ohio Valley, ignoring treaties and boundaries. He knew that if nothing changed, his people would be destroyed, not by war, but by slow suffocation. He decided to act. In the winter of 1762-63, Pontiac sent messengers to every tribe from the Mississippi to the Mohawk. He carried a wampum belt, a sacred belt of purple and white shells, symbolizing unity. He told the story of his vision. In the vision, the Master of Life, the Great Spirit, had appeared to a Delaware prophet named Neoland. The Master of Life said, "The land on which you live is not for the white man. I made it for you. Why do you suffer the white man to dwell among you? Drive them out. Return to your old ways. Do not drink their poison. Do not wear their clothes. Do not use their guns. I will help you." Pontiac adapted this message for his own people. He added a political and military plan. He would attack Fort Detroit, the key to the West. If Detroit fell, the other forts would fall. The British would be driven back across the Appalachians. The native peoples would be free. The tribes listened. They agreed. The uprising was set for May 1763. The attack on Fort Detroit was a masterpiece of deception. On May 1st, 1763, Pontiac visited the fort with a large party of warriors, ostensibly to dance and negotiate. He studied the fort's defenses. He noted the weak points. He planned to return on May 7th with a larger party, hide weapons under blankets, and launch a surprise attack. But the British commander, Major Henry Gladwin, had been warned by a native informant. When Pontiac arrived on May 7th, Gladwin's soldiers were armed and ready. Pontiac could not launch his attack. He withdrew. He was furious. He knew that the element of surprise was lost. But he did not give up. On May 9th, he laid siege to the fort. His warriors surrounded Detroit. They cut off supply lines. They ambushed relief columns. They burned outlying farms and buildings. The British were trapped. For months they lived on short rations, eating horses, dogs, and leather. They could not break the siege. Pontiac's warriors, meanwhile, spread across the frontier. On May 16th, a combined force of Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi captured Fort Sandusky. On May 25th, the same force took Fort St. Joseph. On May 28th, Fort Miami fell. On June 2nd, a party of Ojibwe warriors played a game of lacrosse outside Fort Michilimackinac, the great fort at the Straits of Mackinac. The British soldiers watched. The ball was thrown over the fort wall. The warriors rushed in to retrieve it and grabbed the hidden weapons. They captured the fort, killed most of the garrison, and held it for over a year. Fort Weatanan, Fort Presque Isle, Fort Le Boeuf, and Fort Venango also fell. Only Fort Detroit, Fort Pitt, modern Pittsburgh, and Fort Niagara held out. The British Empire was reeling. The colonies were terrified. Settlers fled from the frontier by the thousands. The uprising had shaken the colonies to their core. But Pontiac could not take Detroit. The fort was too strong, and the British had control of the lakes. They could bring in supplies and reinforcements by water. Pontiac's warriors were not sailors. They could not stop the ships. In July 1763, a British relief force led by Captain James Dalyell arrived at Detroit. Dalyell was confident. He boasted that he would crush the savages and lift the siege. On July 31st, he led a night attack against Pontiac's camp. Pontiac was waiting. He had learned of the plan from a native woman inside the fort. He set an ambush. Dalyell's column walked into a deadly crossfire. Delaware was killed. Over 50 of his men were killed or wounded. The relief force fled back to Detroit. The siege continued, but the tide was turning. The British had learned from their defeats. They began to fight differently, using native scouts, adapting to forest warfare, and building stronger defenses. They also used a weapon that Pontiac could not counter: smallpox. At Fort Pitt, the British commander, Colonel Henry Booker, gave blankets and handkerchiefs from the smallpox hospital to a visiting Delaware delegation. The disease spread through the tribes. It killed thousands. It weakened Pontiac's alliance. By the autumn of 1763, the siege of Detroit was faltering. Pontiac's warriors were tired, hungry, and sick. Their ammunition was running low. The British offered peace. Pontiac refused. He believed that he could still win, but in October 1763, he received word that the French had signed a peace treaty with the British, the Treaty of Paris. The French had surrendered all their North American claims. There would be no French help. Pontiac's alliance, which had been held together by the hope of French support, began to crumble. One by one, the tribes made peace with the British. Pontiac held out until the summer of 1764. Then, reluctantly, he agreed to negotiate. He did not surrender. He negotiated. The British promised to recognize native hunting rights and to regulate trade. Pontiac accepted. He said, "I have fought for my people. I have done what I thought was right. I have no regrets." The uprising was over. The aftermath of Pontiac's rebellion was devastating for the native peoples. The British did not keep their promises. They continued to build forts, to allow settlement, to restrict trade. Pontiac himself was no longer the leader he had once been. His power had faded. In 1766, he met with the British Superintendent of Indian Affairs, Sir William Johnson. Johnson gave him gifts and promised peace. Pontiac accepted. He returned to his village. He tried to live quietly, but his enemies, both British and native, had not forgotten him. On April 20th, 1769, Pontiac was visiting the village of Cahokia in what is now Illinois. He was murdered by a Peoria warrior, likely hired by a British trader who feared Pontiac's influence. He was about 49 years old. His death was not a battle death. It was an assassination. He was buried in a secret location, no one knows where. His grave is lost, but his legacy is not lost. Pontiac's rebellion was the most formidable Native American uprising of the 18th century. It changed British policy. The British government, shocked by the uprising, issued the Proclamation of 1763. The proclamation forbade colonial settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. It created a vast native reserve. The colonists were furious. They had fought the French to gain access to that land. Now the British were giving it to the savages. The Proclamation of 1763 was one of the major grievances that led to the American Revolution. In a strange twist of history, Pontiac's rebellion helped cause the revolution that created the United States. The colonists who rebelled against Britain in 1775 were, in part, rebelling against the protections Britain had given to Pontiac's people. The American Revolution, in a sense, was the second act of Pontiac's rebellion. So what can we learn from Pontiac? First, that unity is power. Pontiac did something that no native leader had done before. He united tribes who were traditional enemies. He gave them a common purpose, the expulsion of the British. That unity almost succeeded. It failed because of disease, because of British naval power, and because the French abandoned their allies. But the lesson remains: divided, the tribes were conquered. United, they almost won. Second, that vision matters. Pontiac's vision, the message of the Master of Life, was not just a religious revelation. It was a political manifesto. It gave the native peoples a reason to fight. It reminded them of who they were. A people without a vision cannot resist. Pontiac gave them a vision. Third, that adaptability is survival. The British adapted to Pontiac's tactics. They learned to fight in the forest. They used native scouts. They used biological warfare. Pontiac could not adapt to smallpox. He could not adapt to British naval superiority. His failure to adapt cost him the war. Fourth, that a leader's greatest weapon is trust. Pontiac's warriors trusted him. They followed him into battle against the most powerful empire on earth. They trusted him because he had proven himself in battle, in diplomacy, in his vision. Trust is not given, it is earned. Pontiac earned it. Fifth, that defeat is not the end. Pontiac lost his war. He was assassinated. His people were eventually forced onto reservations. But his name, his legend, survived. He is remembered as a hero, not a failure, because he fought for something worth fighting for, because he almost won, because he showed that an empire could be shaken. That is not defeat. That is legacy. Today, Pontiac is remembered in many ways. The city of Pontiac, Michigan, is named after him. There are Pontiac streets, schools, and parks across the Midwest. The General Motors car brand Pontiac was named after him, though the brand is now discontinued. His statue stands in Pontiac, Michigan, and in Ottawa, Canada. He is a symbol of resistance, not just for Native Americans, but for anyone who has ever stood against overwhelming power. The British won the war. The Americans took the land. Pontiac's people are a shadow of what they once were. But Pontiac himself, his courage, his vision, his refusal to surrender, that is still here. Still inspiring, still reminding us that one person can make a difference, that a leader with a vision can move nations, that an uprising, even when it fails, can change history. Pontiac's rebellion shook the colonies. It changed British policy. It helped cause the American Revolution. It changed the course of North American history. Not bad for a man who started with nothing but a vision and a wampum belt. This is the story of Pontiac, the Ottawa chief who led a rebellion, the uprising that shook the colonies, the leader who almost won, and the legend that will never, ever be forgotten. His grave is lost. His people are scattered. But his spirit, the spirit of resistance, of unity, of hope, that spirit still walks the forests of the Great Lakes, still speaks in the council fires, still whispers to those who will listen, "The land is not for the white man, the land is for the people. Fight, do not give up. I did not. Pontiac, remember his name, his war is over." His legend has just begun.